Laura, right?
Yeah.
I want to try to remember.
Laura
Okay.
Edwards.
Yeah, Laura Edwards is going to give her testimony. If you'd like to stand and take about, no, just kidding.
I will later.
She's going to give her testimony, okay?
Do you have a title for this moment?
I'm going to call this title The Prodigal Daughter. And I should have done that before when I shared on my ladies' tea. I neglected to do that. But yeah, I'm the prodigal daughter. I'm a living example of a prodigal daughter. But you know, when you're young and life just kind of throws you all kinds of little curves and whammies in the face, slaps in the face. You know, you grow up in an alcoholic family, and a social type family. It was social alcoholism involved with my dad. And so there was some abuse involved, more verbal abuse than anything. But as I grew up, we did grow up in a Presbyterian church. My dad was a Bible study teacher. My mother was a Bible study teacher, and we grew up in the First Presbyterian Church. And then my mom got molested by the associate pastor out in the parking lot, and my dad caught him. And so, needless to say, that point on, we quit going to church. So we just kind of had a problem with that because the church elders and the head pastor were in denial that this had happened, even though there were people that saw it. And but anyway, that kind of took me out of the church scene. So I did grow up, you know, knowing a little bit about the basic Bible stories that you learn when you're a child. But the only thing at that time, it was a very organized corporate church. And so you never really learned about accepting the Lord. And so I went through life just kind of doing the best I could, being the best daughter that I could. I have 3 brothers younger than me. And before they even got in high school, they all dropped out. And they went in the military. One of them got a dishonorable discharge, went AWOL. The other 2 got honorable discharges. Me, I just existed. You know, my family focused more on my brothers than they did on me. So I was pretty independent. I learned to be self-sufficient. I took care of my baby brother when I was in high school. After high school, I married the first love of my life, my high school sweetheart, and he was in the Navy. And that didn't last long. I ended up leaving him with some other guy that worked in a donut shop. And we went across country with my ex-husband was in the Navy, so I had military credentials to go to the PX and buy goods. So I did a journey with this gentleman that I met. We traveled cross country in a car that I purchased with bad checks. And we just went from state to state to state, going on military bases, writing checks, and just hoarding whatever we could buy. We dined in dashed hotels. We bought clothes. I even bought a little German Shepherd puppy. Called him Chico. And by the time I got over to California, I was burned out. I was being sexually abused. I was being physically abused. Alcoholism and drugs were involved in the whole scenario. So at that point, I was exhausted. I was burned out. I was like, I can't take this anymore. So I set up a situation where I went into the PX. I went back to the checker to write a check for cash. And I told them, I said, when y'all run this check, it's going to be bad because I'm tired of doing this. I said, I have my boyfriend's out in the car. He's waiting on me to bring all this money out. And I said, and I don't want to do it anymore. So the military police came and got me, and they took me in the back, and then they went out to the parking lot and got him. So I ended up in Victorville, California, and stayed in the jail there. I did 55 days for the state of California for writing a bad check.
They're trying to hear. Can you go louder?
Oh, yeah. So since I wrote, after I did all that, I ended up in jail in Victorville, California. And then while I was in Victorville, I got introduced to the Hell Angels girls, and I got introduced my first encounter of same-sex relations. And that kind of freaked me out. And everybody in there was either Hispanic or Indian or something like that. And so they gave me a nickname, Miss Alabama. I was Miss Alabama because I had this southern drawl, and they said, "You are not from around here." I said, "No, I'm not." So I went into a deep depression while I was there, and I overdosed on laxatives. Of all things, I had laxatives. So I ended up spending almost a week in the bathroom and couldn't eat anything, couldn't keep anything in my stomach. And I got down to almost 90 pounds, and for 5'9", that's pretty skinny.
Wow.
So, yeah. So when after all that, the federal government got a hold of me at that point, and they said, "We're extraditing you to Los Angeles because you're going to go and appear in federal court." So I went to federal court, and I did some more time for them. And while I was there, I was in Sybil Brand Institute for Women. And during that time, Patty Hearst was in there during all that fiasco. Yeah, they had her in isolation. And also Al Green. Y'all know who Al Green is? Well, his secretary was embezzling money from Al Green, so they put her in jail too. But Al Green came out. He had just become a pastor.
Yes.
And he came out and did a big concert for us while we were there. So that was kind of interesting encounter that I had. Then I finally went to court, and I had a public defender, a federal public defender. And this guy was...
Bluetooth disconnected.
This was just unbelievable because this man tracked down every single check that I wrote across the United States, contacted every store that I did anything with, all the hotels, got a hold of all of them. And, you know, I wasn't a Christian yet, but God had his hand on me during that time because all those charges were dropped. So there were only a few places where I had to pay restitution, and the restitution was only like $150.
Wow, that's God.
So they sent me to a halfway house. This lady, they called it the Hoffman House. It's a federal halfway house. And it was usually a halfway house for women that were coming out of federal penitentiaries, like CRC and some other places. But so here I am. I'm only 19. I'm only 19 years old. I'm totally naive. And here I am living in a halfway house with big time federal cons, you know, people that spent years in prison. Some of them were on the top 10 of the most wanted list. And I got introduced there. I got introduced to a prostitute. She still kept prostituting when she got out of prison. And another girl, she was a lesbian. She was a heroin addict. She got back into heroin. And then there was another girl that was dating this guy she introduced me to my boyfriend on a blind date. So I got introduced to people doing heroin, black tar heroin, and junkies. And even though I never did it, I never put a needle in my arm. The only thing I did at that time was smoke pot and maybe have a beer. That was about it. But all that time, I was with them for 5 years. I've seen people with abscesses. I've seen people die in front of me. I've seen junkies sit around in a room with people ODing and they're not doing anything. All they care about is getting that next fix. That's all they cared about. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, what in the world am I doing in here? I said, these people are dying. Why are we sitting here? We should be helping them. And everybody's going, no, the police are coming. Let's go. So we all ran out the door. But there were people that just stayed there because they were busy getting high. They didn't care. They didn't care about anything. They just had to have that high, you know? It's like, geez, unbelievable. So then later on, I ended up getting pregnant. And my boyfriend and I got an apartment together after I finished my duties at the halfway house. I got a job working as a roustabout in an oil field in Signal Hill, California. I was the first female roustabout for Texaco Corporation on the West Coast.
Can you explain what it is?
A roustabout does repairs oil rigs, works in oil refineries, repairs oil spills, oil leaks, cleans up oil wells, digs ditches, lays pipeline, pipe fitting, use the big wrenches, shovel, trash. I did all the dirty work. And I rode a bicycle uphill and downhill every single day. And I'm talking about 90 degrees up. Yeah, I was getting fit. But I was pregnant. So I ended up having to leave my job because I was pregnant. So at that point, my boyfriend introduced me to a guy who could let me work from home, and he would give me a paycheck to do mail envelopes working from home. So I was all for that. So they gave me like $150 a week. It was on a payroll check. Well, I cashed the first 2 checks. They were fine. I went to cash the 3rd check, and the liquor store owner where we went to cash it said, these checks are no good. They're bogus. And I'm on probation. And I'm pregnant almost 4 months. Needless to say, they came at 6 in the morning and arrested me and picked me up, and I was back in Sybil Brand Institute for Women again. And my whole pregnancy was there. I was sentenced to 8 months for counterfeiting. And I was very honest with the detectives. You know, they're trying to find out who was issuing all these payroll checks because other people were getting them too. So they were trying to get to the link, you know, to the core of who was doing this. So, yeah, I ended up in jail for 8 months. I did 6 months, less than 6 months, because I was in my 9th month, due any day, when I got out of Sybil Brand Institute for Women. And the whole time I was in there, all I did was read my Bible. And I read the book, Nikki Cruz, The Cross and the Switchblade. And yeah, isn't that amazing? I wasn't even saved yet. And I'm reading all that and reading the Bible, and I was even praying, you know, but it just wasn't there yet. So finally I got out of Sybil Brand, went back to the halfway house again, and stayed there for about a month. Then I got an apartment back with the boyfriend again, and this time we ended up out in Anaheim, and I just started doing my own thing after that. Finally, I got separated from him. When I had my son, I woke up one morning and my son was in my boyfriend's bathroom, and he was getting in the bottom of the cabinet where the syringes and the burnt spoons and the drugs were, and he had it all pulled out on the bathroom floor, and he was sitting there getting ready to play in it. And I said, that's it. That is the end. This is gonna stop right there. That stops right there. And so I called a friend of mine. He was a pastor and his wife. They had been trying to counsel me. I had met them in a restaurant or something. I can't remember. It was so long. My memory's a little vague on it. But they helped me and my son get out of the house. We had to have the police come, and my boyfriend was so wasted. He didn't even know the time of day. He didn't know what he was doing. So the police just dealt with him. And foster care came and took my son. And I went and stayed at this pastor and his wife's house with their 2 little girls. I stayed at their house probably for about a month. And I got a job, started working, started making my own money, started taking care of myself. And during that time, I set up to have a private adoption because I knew I was not ready. I was not going to be able to provide for my son what he deserves. He does not deserve to be treated and live the way that he was being lived in. And so we did a private adoption, and this is totally the Lord. I got to tell you this, because when I went to sign the final adoption papers, we went into the adoptive parents and myself were put in 2 separate rooms to finalize papers before going to the judge. Well, they accidentally put us both in the same room. And we met each other and we conversed.
Wow.
And yeah, we had an encounter, very brief encounter, and they were so nice and so sweet. And the lawyer pulled me out and put me back in the other room. And he said, "I'm so sorry, that was not supposed to happen." And I said, it is what it is, it was meant to be, because the agreement was I would cut all ties completely. And if he ever asked who I was, they had all my pictures. They had all the pictures of me with him. And I had a lot of pictures with him. That was one thing I did do, was I took a lot of pictures with him. But
how old was he when you gave
he was 2 years old. I kept him for almost 2 years. And so when I went to sign the final papers in court, boyfriend went with me because I was with him again. I was codependent that I am, because of the alcohol family, it's the pattern. So he drove me to the courthouse in Los Angeles, and we went in there, and my son came in with him into the courtroom. That was the last time I saw him. And he was talking, saying airplane and this and that and the other, and I'm like, wow. He's doing so good. Dressed real nice, looked healthy, had color in his face, looked happy, was just as joyful as he could be, saying Jesus and airplane, and because he was with a Christian family.
Wow.
The people that adopted him was the pastor's brother and wife. They could not have kids. So that's why they did the private adoption. It was done through their family relatives. And come to find out, all those relatives were all pastors and all counselors and, in with the Lord, And so they worked with me, trying to get me to accept the Lord. I went to Calvary Chapel in Costa Mesa. At that time, Pastor Chuck Smith. And so I did get involved with a couple of the Christian commune houses there. I'm still not saved yet. I'm still not saved yet. You see what's going on here, don't you? I mean, if it's like, God, light bulb, Laura, look. It's like, God, please. So anyway, I ended up leaving all that, and I went to see my dad. My dad had moved back from Guam. He left the country so he wouldn't have to pay child support and alimony.
So sad.
Yeah, so 5 years later, he comes back to California with his new wife and 2 stepdaughters and living in Palm Springs, California. So I went to Palm Springs. Boy, did I Palm Springs was glamorous. Oh my gosh, I was making such good money there, cocktail waitressing, food waitressing, working in a hotel during the day, working in a dinner house at night, and discoing all night long. Disco, 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 that was it. So I turned into a disco queen down there, finally got rid of the boyfriend and started hanging out with people at my restaurant and stuff. So we were doing Quaaludes. That was in the Quaalude days. And
What's Quaalude?
Quaaludes, oh gosh.
Central nervous system depressant.
Yeah, it's a depressant.
CNS. It makes you
So it's a
relax.
pill?
Like
It
this.
makes you relax and calm and drowsy,
You can't
and
walk straight.
but at the same time your
Function.
hormones go weird. Your sexual drive changes. It's involved. So with that, and between that and the cocaine, the disco, and I was also getting involved with the gay community, mostly men, because they loved hanging around me. They always thought because of my low voice and being so tall, they thought, oh, she's got to be a transsexual. And I'm like, nah, not even going there. So we'd all go out together and just dance all night long and, just do all these crazy things, stay up all night long, go to the coffee shop, watch the sun rise, and then go sleep for an hour and then get up and go to work and do it all over again. Did that every single day.
Wow.
I can't do that anymore. Those days are behind me. But I did that. I don't know how I did it, but I did it every day for I don't know how long. And then finally, I met this guy at an Easter Seals disco dance-a-thon, and was he a cutie? He looked like a little Hawaiian local guy. So he and I hit it off at this 24-hour Easter Seals dance-a-thon. We won contests together and prizes and everything else. So we got all hooked up and everything. So after that, we started going out together and going to the discos and entering contests and things like that. Well, come to find out, he had to go back to Honolulu in Waikiki, where his father owned a nightclub. So he said, when I get out there, I'm going to send you to come out, and we'll have time together, and then when you're ready to go back home, we'll get you back on the plane and send you back home. Great. I was in hog heaven. I came to Waikiki, took me out, dined and danced, and spent the night at his dad's one night. Then we got a hotel room down on Waikiki Beach, and he paid for a week. And he worked in Waikiki when they did the tricycle thingies with the little buggies on the back. Yeah, they had, those were all over the place back then. They don't have them now. I think they're only in certain areas. But yeah, he was doing that during the day, and then we go out and disco at night. And I was always trying to look for a job, trying to find a place to work. And it was in the summertime, and back in '76, that was like dead season. Nobody hired anybody in the summertime, not in Waikiki, not anywhere. So I couldn't find a job, and the guy ended up dumping me after 2 days in the hotel room. And so I had about 3 days to myself there to try and find a job and do all these other things, and time ran out. I ended up on the street with all my clothes and nowhere to go. Tried to call my dad, tried to call my mom. Dad was moving. He had hit rock bottom with alcohol, so he was driving from Palm Springs to Mississippi, where his hometown is. My mom was busy with my other brothers. They were in jail for drugs, so she had her hands full with that. She didn't have time to mess with me either. So I was pretty much stuck here on an island with nowhere to go, no job, not a penny in my pocket.
Wow.
So I ended up on the streets. And that was another whole new world. I did things, just, you get, the enemy is so conniving. You sit there and say, I will never, ever, ever do this in my life. I will never stoop that low. Never. Oh, don't ever say that, because sometimes you get brought down so low, you can't even look at yourself. You're so disgusted with who you are and who you've turned into. And it's just like any ounce of love that I have for myself was gone. Is like total guilt at that point. After going through giving up my son and all this other stuff, through everything through life, it's just like that was the whammy right there. That was it for me. So I'm just like, I can't deal with this anymore. So I was prostituting, worked in nude bars, dine and dashing restaurants, even eating out of trash cans, just doing whatever I could to get through each day, whether it was staying with a guy or sleeping on a park bench, or just hiding under a tree, or just walking around till you just can't walk around anymore. I mean, you don't want to sleep anywhere. You just want to keep walking, and then go and hit the beach during the day, and that's when you can sleep, which is what they're doing here now.
Yeah.
So, but back then they didn't have that problem. That was not a problem back then. They didn't have the homeless that they have now. But anyway, I got to the point where I went down to the beach and I said, okay, God, I think this is it. I'm just going to walk out in the water. Nobody gives a crap about me. I'm done with this. I am totally done. I said, if you're really here, help me get out of this mess, because I can't do this anymore. And I was walking into the water, and I heard God's voice for the first time. And he said, Laura, I love you.
Praise God.
You are my child, and I am not going to let any harm come to you. And I'm like, okay. So at that point, I was sobbing. I was crying so hard, walking down the sidewalk. And it was a Sunday. Of all days, it was a Sunday. And church on the beach. Same place it's always been since 1970. I stood underneath a palm tree. The service was just ending. And one of the volunteer counselors, who was also a Christian psychologist, came up to me and he said, can I help you? And I just broke down at that point. And I want you to know, all those counselors immediately came to me, and they all started hugging me and talking to me. And they gave me a card and said, come to our office at 4:00. We're going to help you get set up. So I had a long wait, and the enemy was really enticing me through that whole time. A gentleman approached me. He said, well, I can give you a place to stay in exchange for cleaning our house. And I'm like, well, we'll see. We'll see. I say, follow me to this office. I said, if it doesn't work out, I'll go with you. Well, we went up to the office. I popped my head in the door. I said, I have somebody with me. Can I invite them in?
And this was at chaplaincy?
Yeah, the chaplaincy office, yeah. And it was on the other end of the beach.
Oh, the chaplaincy.
By Diamond Head, yeah.
Was Pastor Alex overseeing it then?
No,
Was it
Bob
pretty-
Turnbull
Oh, it
was.
so-
Yeah,
it was
Bob
way back
Turnbull
then,
was,
huh?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, Bob Turnbull was. Him and his wife and all of them, they just, they nurtured me. But as soon as I turned my head, the guy had completely disappeared into thin air. It was so strange, because the elevator was like way down the hallway. And I wasn't gone my head was not turned that long where I couldn't have seen him. It was like he just evaporated into thin air. So I knew it was the enemy. I knew it was. But as soon as I got in there, they got me into a shelter with Salvation Army Women's Shelter. They tracked down my clothes. They found my trunk of clothing. A tech cab driver had it.
Nice.
And they also got me a plane ticket. They all pitched in to go through the Teen Challenge program over in Maui.
Nice.
And that's another whole story there. But that was when I first accepted the Lord, for real. That was the time I gave my heart to Jesus, was when I heard God's voice for the first time. And years gone by, now I just became a certified chaplain. And I work with Hale Ho'omana, a Hawaii Missions worship hula team. And we come here in mission every year. I didn't come back here till 33 years later. I saw the chaplaincy on Christmas Eve in Tampa, Florida, on a public access channel. And I reconnected with Alex at that point. And ever since then, I've been coming every year. And I've shared my testimony out on the beach about 3 or 4 times. So, and at the Bible study on Wednesdays, when Alex had that. Yeah.
The breakfast, huh?
Yeah. So I am the prodigal daughter. And you know, the one thing I've always wanted, I've really learned now, it's so important to know when you accept Jesus into your heart, you don't just do the sinner's prayer. Anybody can say the sinner's prayer and say they're saved. But, you know, the Bible says we're baptized by water and spirit. Until you have the Spirit, you're not saved. You have to have that Spirit encounter to be saved. So, you know, it's where you have to have that heart-to-heart with God. You know, and I thank the Lord that He did that with me, because I don't think I would have been able to accept it any other way. You know, I needed to know He was real in my life. I knew about Him. I knew of Him and His stories, but I never knew how real He was. And I'm going to tell you, I have a lot of stories, a whole lot of stories that I can tell. He's healed me from cancer, breast cancer. He's gotten me off the street another time. I was homeless again in St. Pete, Florida, and He got me off the street there too. Because when you walk away from the Lord, He still draws you back. So I am a repeat prodigal daughter. But when you have that encounter where you're down on your knees, He brings you to your knees, and you give your hands up to Him and you go, okay, Lord, I'm surrendering my whole self to You. Body, mind, spirit, and soul right now, in the name of Jesus. Come into my life. Let me worship You and You alone. Let me live for You and You alone. I want to die for You alone. Fill me to overflowing with Your anointing Spirit. And let Him speak to your heart, and things will happen in your life that you never knew. Your faith will be so grown and so blown out, you can't help but be joyful and dance and sing and praise, even through the storms.
Amen.
Even through the worst parts of your life, He still brings you through it. And He brings you out whiter than snow, and happier than you've ever been in your life.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Hallelujah. Thank you.